Welcome to the SnapEd webinar series. Today's webinar is the 2015 Dietary Guidelines. I'm Joan Paddock, Senior Extension Associate with the Division of Nutritional Sciences on campus at Cornell University. Since this is a pre-recorded webinar, you can send your questions or comments to me via email. My email address on the slide. Unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity to have live question and answer, which is sometimes a benefit to webinars, but nonetheless, I'd be happy to answer any questions at any point via email. The objectives for today are listed on the slide. We're going to do a brief review of the importance of the Dietary Guidelines, attempt to highlight the changes from our 2010 version, explore the details of the information that's presented in the 2015 version, and discuss and suggest ideas for working with participants as we go through this. So what are the Dietary Guidelines, and why are they important? The Dietary Guidelines form the foundation of USDA federal policy. The Dietary Guidelines were first released in 1980, and then in 1990, Congress passed the Nutritional Monitoring and Related Research Act, which mandates that Health and Human Services and USDA jointly review, update, and publish the Dietary Guidelines every 5 years. They convene a advisory group to look at research and review publications that have been put out in the ensuing year. Now let's talk about the importance of the Dietary Guidelines. Because they serve as a policy foundation, they're important for all of the federal programs that we work with. So school meals and of course WIC. In addition, we have nutrition labeling regulations, and they have to be rooted in a Dietary Guideline. Lots of consumer information and education that's available that works from the Dietary Guideline publication. And of course, not listed here are SNAP-Ed and FNEP, the critical programs that you all work with on a daily basis. So we have this 5-year cycle. Items are published in various forms. And here you have the cover pages of the documents published since 1980. Now you'll notice that the first 4 iterations were in pamphlet style, and these last 3 are in booklet style. So the nature and the content of information that's now put forward is much more complete. If you remember the most recent 2010 version, the booklet is quite extensive. It gives us ideas on the background and thinking of USDA in putting together the Dietary Guidelines. We have the introduction of the social ecological model that gives us the framework for how USDA is thinking about nutrition education in the broader context. So all of this is important for you, and we'll spend more time on that. A couple of things I'd like to point out about this historical walk through each of the publications. You might remember that the My Pyramid was published in 2000 to coincide with that Aim, Build, Choose theme of USDA with the 2000 Dietary Guidelines. MyPlate came out to coincide with the 2010 version. So just a point of history. The other thing I think is interesting to look at is in the 2000 version are these figures that are active. And we had a specific dietary guideline recommendation in the 2000 publication about physical fitness and being active. Although the wording initially appeared in 1995, the 2000 version really emphasized physical activity in a more specific way, and that's continued through these other iterations. Which brings us to the 2015 edition, which came out in January. This is part of the cover page. You might remember that it came out first in electronic form, speaking to the nature and way that we receive and share information. So why so much history? I think it's important for you to realize that this is a long-standing process, that every 5 years is a reasonable amount of time to take stock of nutrition information and research that accumulates, that helps build a case for a recommendation or for us to change recommendations. Sometimes the criticism from the public is, oh, you people in nutrition can't make up your mind. Well, I think you have to remember that nutritional science is an evolving science, that our technology and research tools have changed, and that we're better able to study more precisely some of the questions that we're concerned about. So we actually benefit from this 5-year cycle. Access to information certainly has changed over time, and the way that we share the information has evolved, and the way that we talk about the information has evolved. So 5 years is not a bad sequence, even though it might to the public seem like it's shocking when we amend some of our recommendations. It's usually based in some very serious research over time that's accumulated. That doesn't mean that our recommendations aren't controversial or that the discussion isn't controversial. USDA and HHS have held, during this process, listening sessions to respond to research concerns, consumer concerns, congressional concerns about the process and the nature of what happens with the dietary guidelines. And part of that related to some of the recommendations and their potential influence on the environment, the concerns about possible sustainability of some of these recommendations. In certain areas, there was discussion of taxation of certain products that might be harmful, and was that within the scope of the Dietary Guidelines Committee? So all of these things were discussed openly. It was decided that the committee should stick with dietary recommendations based in science and make those recommendations for USDA to then worry about in terms of how it's framed and shaped. And that's what we're looking at now. That's not to say these policy recommendations of the future won't be equally as controversial. The 2020 Dietary Guidelines publication the committee is charged to come up with recommendations for infants from birth to 24 months. Up until this point, the recommendations have started at age 2. So you might imagine some of the controversy that we might be dealing with when the committee is grappling with breastfeeding recommendations, infant feeding recommendations, and that kind of thing going forward. So that's just a heads up to keep your ear to the ground. And as these things surface, you have actually a good way of framing that for your participants. It's not that the nutritional science world is in disarray. It's that we're taking a hard look at the research. And people have, reasonable people may have differing opinions. Okay, let's focus in on the 2010 dietary recommendations. There are essentially 5 key dietary guidelines, and we're going to go through each one. The lovely thing about the 2015 version is that you have so much supporting information and background in the publications that are available for you to look through. In addition, there are new and innovative consumer teaching tips and tools that are being shared as we go forward, as they're developed for your participants to use. And we'll talk about them towards the end of the presentation. So this is a summary of the 5 recommendations. Follow a healthy eating pattern across the lifespan. Focus on variety, nutrient density, and amounts of food. Limit calories from added sugars, fats, and consider reducing sodium. Shift to healthier food and beverage choices. And support healthy eating patterns for all. So we begin and end with this discussion of eating patterns. So let's jump in to eating patterns right away. What are we talking about? Eating patterns, healthy eating patterns, are the healthy modes of eating that contribute to good health and prevent chronic diseases across the lifespan. The chronic diseases that we're grappling with, of course, obesity, heart disease, high blood pressure, and type 2 diabetes. Those are the chronic diseases that we think, or we believe, that a lifetime of healthy eating habits helps to prevent. And so, across your lifespan, wherever your participants are, improvements in their dietary pattern and dietary choice contribute to long-term health. And so when we make those recommendations, we need to think about the combination of everything that people are consuming, their habits, their traditions, their cultural preferences, and their food budget. All of those concepts, for those of you working in SNAP and FNAP, are not new. We think about that all the time. We try to be relevant. We try to be appropriate for our target audience. So the Dietary Guidelines recommendation emphasizes that, and we need to work towards it. So again, looking at food groups and a variety of food from each food group. So in thinking about how we might characterize this for participants, what does a healthy eating pattern include? And here you go with our consistent messages that follow through from the 2010 version of the Dietary Guidelines. A variety of vegetables, a variety of fruits, especially whole fruit, grains, which at least half would be whole grain, your fat-free dairy, a variety of proteins, and inclusion of oil in your diet versus saturated fat. So a healthy eating pattern would limit your saturated fat, would attempt to minimize trans fat, minimize added sugars, and keep your sodium less than 2,300 milligrams per day. And the sodium recommendation was something that popped up in the 2010 Dietary Guidelines, and we will move forward with that in this version as well. This concept of variety, I think we've chipped away at that over time, but nutrient density might be a more difficult concept for participants, and amounts are certainly important depending on your life cycle stage and your physical activity level. So this particular slide emphasizes all of those good things, summarizing nutrient density, making the best of the calories that you consume by looking at fruits, vegetables, whole grains, a variety of proteins, including seafoods, fat-free dairy, and lean meats and poultry. But the key part of this is the second half of this sentence. So when you purchase these, you prepare them and you serve them, hopefully they'll be consumed, but with little or no added fat, sugar, starches, and sodium. So this speaks to food preparation, and that's something that we concentrate a lot on. You've done many food demos and food tastings. This is important because how you prepare food is as important as how you choose your food. So this is a case where in our food demos and our food presentations, we can go a long way for helping people develop a taste for foods that are prepared in a way that's more healthy. And then the amounts, here the amounts are based on a 2,000 calorie adult diet of a reasonably active person. So you are familiar with the amounts. You can go to My Food Tracker, you go to MyPlate.com. You have a relative sense of amounts in cups or grain equivalents for a variety in the diet. So here we have the lean protein choices and our dairy choices. So within the context of our limited food budgets that we deal with, we try to help people achieve this variety in these amounts. So let's spend a little bit of time on this concept of limiting these added products in our food, sugar, fat, and sodium. What does that really mean, and how do we teach folks about paying more attention to that and actually making changes in their diet? This is where you come in terms of showing people and making it real. So this recommendation, added sugars less than 10% of calories, what does that really mean? What's an added sugar? Added sugars are things that are listed on the label and could include this short list of things, and I'll have a longer list in a future slide. Contrast that to naturally occurring sugars that are already in the fruit or, for example, milk that are not added. So if you look at the label of milk and flavored milk, you'll see that milk has naturally occurring sugar and a fairly substantial amount of carbohydrate in it. But if you compare it to, say, example, chocolate milk, to make it yummy chocolate, we have to add cocoa and some sugar. And if you look at the label, you will notice this higher sugar, added sugar content in flavored milks. So yeah, there are some high carbohydrate foods that we recommend, and fruit's a great example too. But we want to limit the added sugar, so this is where label reading becomes critical. And this is a more complete or easy to read list of added sugars. There are more. This is just a short list. You could go to choosemyplate.gov and you get even longer list than this. So as you think about the foods that you use in teaching or the labels that you're using when you do your label reading exercises, you might want to point out these names and labels. These are reasonably easy to read. They're not overly chemical, but you can find those on the choosemyplate.gov website. Now we know what the bigger culprits in our culture are with relative to sweetened sugar. Sweetened beverages, for example, added sugar, I'm sorry. Candy and baked goods. Of course, we have that picture of the lovely donuts with not just frosting, but frosting and sprinkles. Likely culprits, easy to identify. I think we need to help our participants make the healthy choice a little easier. Yogurt, and particularly low-fat yogurt, would be a wonderful snack, but unless you're looking at the label, you could pick a yogurt with lots of added sugar. The same with your grain products. There are lots of great breakfast cereals out there that are whole grain, but there are some advertised as whole grain, which they are, that also have much more added sugar than we might guess. Granola bars, I think some of you have recipes that you use in teaching, homemade granola bars that are really great with natural sugar, maybe made with honey, maybe made with molasses. But there are commercial granola bars that are very sweet, and looking at the label becomes critical. And lastly, there are commercially made convenience foods that have a range of added sugar. So I'm just putting spaghetti sauce up there as the visual. I'm not casting aspersions on any of those brands. But I want to make the point that when you shop and when you do grocery store tours or when your participants are looking at the choices, and there are so many, that reading the label becomes critical if you want to reduce the added sugars in the products that you purchase. All right, what does this concept of 10% really mean? Well, 10% of a 2,000 calorie diet, sort of an ordinary, easy number to use because of the math, would be 200 calories from added sugar. Well, we don't necessarily eat calories, we eat products with sugar in it, but so if we convert the calories to grams, each gram of sugar has 4 calories. So 200 calories would be contributed by 50 grams of sugar. So how much is 50 grams? We can convert that to teaspoons because we know that for each teaspoon there's 4 grams. So dividing 4 into 50, we get just about 12. So the maximum added sugar that should be consumed by a person using 2,000 calorie diet would be 50 grams or 12 teaspoons. Now that's important because of label reading, but I just want you to show you that 50 grams adds up quickly. Many of you have done the soda content of sugar in regular soda, the soda exercise, roughly 39 grams. If you add a regular sized candy bar to an after-school snack and you're having regular soda, you've already jumped over the 50-gram hurdle and you're at 66 grams. You have a fruited yogurt and a granola, you're about 30 grams. And then for adults, a snack cake plus coffee with sugar, maybe that's your 3 o'clock snack break, you're already at 39 grams. So I think it would be a really great exercise for everybody to sit at your desk and add up the added sugar in your diet, particularly if you're adding sugar to coffee or tea. That adds up quite quickly. That might even be a great exercise for your participants. So the second concern we have is limiting saturated fats to less than 10% of calories. And again, we have this great opportunity to teach label reading. So foods highest in saturated fats would be meat dishes, whole milk, and fats that have a high concentration of saturated fat. So your combination dishes are usually the culprit, and then in processed foods. There are 2 places to look for saturated fats on the label of margarine, shortening, and then coconut palm oils are also high in saturated fats, and we'll look at that in a minute. This particular chart is available to you on MyPlate Wins, so you might blow this up and use this for participants or not, but I just wanted to show that this, on the left side of this chart in the brown, represents the percent of saturated fats in these various products. The orange is representing monounsaturated fats. The peach would be polyunsaturated fats. So the goal would be limiting the brown, or the saturated fat, and maximizing your polyunsaturated fat over here in peach. So a shortcut to think about this, solid fats typically are saturated fats. Saturated fats are solid at room temperature. That's an easy way to remember that. So shortening, pork fat, beef lard, butter, all solid at room temperature. Two exceptions here, coconut oil, palm oil. Again, label reading comes into play. The oils you want to promote: safflower, canola, sunflower, sesame, soybean, peanut, all easily found in the grocery store, all liquid at room temperature, all convenient and reasonably cheap. Just a word about cholesterol. A cholesterol recommendation is not specifically made in the 2015 Dietary Guidelines, but The recommendation from the Institute of Medicine would be to eat as little dietary cholesterol as possible. And so where does dietary cholesterol come from? Animal products. Meat, poultry, dairy, shellfish, and usually targeted would be eggs. So your animal products typically are higher in cholesterol. So if you get a question about that, that's where we are. And lastly, reducing the sodium, a recommendation that came up in the 2010 Dietary Guidelines, 2,300 milligrams or less. Most sodium comes from highly processed and packaged foods, meats, mixed dishes, and condiments. How can we deal with our participants? Again, label reading. So we feature pizza on this particular slide. Processed food. You can find all kinds of varieties in your frozen food section of the grocery store. Great, convenient food. Has all your 4 food groups on it. But what are your sources of sodium? Cheese, salami, bologna, ham, olives, the sauce. If frozen, then probably sodium is added to keep it shelf stable in some form or other. And then occasionally in cooking, even if it's a frozen pre-prepared pizza, people add garlic salt, table salt, and other kinds of sodium-containing spices. So we need to really think about how much sodium is contributed through prepackaged food. All right, let's look at the next dietary guideline. Shift to healthier food and beverage choices. I think this is a really great recommendation. It's encouraging people to shift toward the positive. It's not a cut and dried one-step event. Because we know so much about food choice and how difficult it is to move people towards behavior change. This reinforces the work that you're doing. People need to shift gradually to the more healthy choice. Now, featured on this slide are 2 sort of culprits in our diet that are things that we want to limit: alcohol and caffeine. Alcohol, limiting it for women 1 drink and for men 2 drinks. And there's a equivalency for whether you're drinking beer, wine, or hard liquor. And the other recommendation about caffeine, it's talking about moderate caffeine consumption and certainly no caffeine consumption for youth. But for adults, the recommendation for moderate is 3 to 5 8-ounce cups. So I would challenge you to find in your office anybody who's drinking from an 8-ounce cup. 8-ounce cups are really tough to find. Most adults on their desk would have a 12-ounce cup. So when you say 3 to 5 cups of coffee, make sure you're talking about 8-ounce cups and impress upon people what an 8-ounce cup looks like. In our supersized society, 8-ounce cups are rare. The other caveat is to watch for excess calories in terms of added sugar, cream, flavored coffee creamers. They're so popular and so good, so there are added calories there that people are not thinking about when they consume their morning latte. Okay, another really wonderful dietary guideline: support healthy changes. And the message is everyone together can make a healthy difference for their community. And so what does this sound like to you? This sounds like the work that we're doing in policy systems and environmental approaches to nutrition ed. So it's an attempt to make the healthy choice the easy choice everywhere. And we all have a stake in this, and we all can make healthy movement towards healthy choices everywhere. So we know about home. Many of you have been working in the schools. Certainly government has a role, and we've seen the dietary guidelines guidance change over time. Many of you have workplace policies in the making, or you're operating under some new workplace policies that promote health, and that's great. And then the food industry, of course, has a stake in helping us move this direction and make it profitable for them at the same time. And we've seen changes in the food market and our food environment over time, which is encouraging, and we keep moving the dial towards the more healthy choice. And there you have, gardening and other ideas that you all are working on to help us move that way. One of our healthy lifestyle choices is physical activity. So the Dietary Guidelines continues this recommendation for physical activity as a daily part of our life and provides the number of minutes for an adult per week, plus a recommendation that children up to age 16 need 60 minutes of physical activity every day as part of a healthy lifestyle. So if we're not doing it now, it's time to think about where we can add it into our daily routine. So here's a more formal summary of the Dietary Guidelines recommendations. 4 relate to food, and 1 relates to environment. So we have our work cut out for us in terms of our programs, and we have lots of teaching opportunities. So I think that some of these themes are repeating in the work that we're doing every day. This idea of shifting towards a healthy choice, encouraging people along a continuum, knowing where they are now and moving them towards a better future. Variety, a concept that we teach with the vegetable and fruit group, and now the protein group. Get a variety, choose the leaner protein choices, include seafood in your diet, and look toward vegetable sources of protein. The Mediterranean eating pattern is a really wonderful one that folks have been working with because of their emphasis on oil, particularly olive oil, to maximize your polyunsaturated fats and your monounsaturated fats and eliminate your saturated fats. We've talked about caffeine, limiting added sugar, and of course your sodium. Themes that repeat in our standard curriculum and that are emphasized by you every day. This is a chart that's available to you on myplatewins.gov, and it highlights our current eating patterns across the country. And so the 0 point would be where we want to be. To the left are the people that are over-consuming, that are under-consuming these products, and to the right, these are people who are over-consuming. So you can see that more people are under-consuming fruits, vegetables, the good things we're trying to emphasize, and they're over-consuming on the right, the things we want to limit. And so we have our work cut out for us. There's no question that we will be fully engaged in these messages and themes for quite a while. I think this is instructive to partner agencies to sort of underline the seriousness of the work that we do. It might be interesting to some of our participants, but I think partner agencies might be surprised by how far we need to go to get our participants on the right track. So let's talk about resources. First of all, the Dietary Guidelines Appendix, while might look dry to you, is really wonderfully referencing all of the background research and supporting documentation for the dietary guidelines. I think as professionals in the field, that's a really good place to go to get ideas, to shape your presentations to partner agencies and other staff. The MyPlate.gov and ChooseMyPlate.gov is a tremendous resource to go to look for things for participants and actually to send participants to both places to get ideas for them to use in their family. There are some very consumer-friendly things that we'll talk about that they can take advantage of. And I'd like to highlight the Consumer's Guide to the Dietary Guidelines for Health Professionals that you can find on MyPlate, ChooseMyPlate.gov, MyPlate Wins. A treasure trove of resources, and we'll talk about them in a minute. So the Choose My Plate graphics, ChooseMyPlate.gov, you look at the graphics on that website, you can find all of the chips that I used on the various pages of this PowerPoint to highlight the food groups, and they're color-coded to the chips on my plate. Of course, you know you can get that MyPlate icon in a variety of colors with a variety of backgrounds. You can get it in black and white for better printing. It depends on what you're doing or what kind of handout you want to create or logos that you want to create. It's one icon that's really versatile and can help you in your teaching to drive home these various messages. There's also this one-page handout, and while it's kind of dense, I think it's useful, again, for partner agencies to summarize the 5 dietary guidelines, highlight what a healthy eating pattern includes with the icon, and then highlight what a healthy eating pattern might limit. And so in one page, you've got a summary of the whole dietary guidelines booklet. It might be a little overwhelming for participants, but it might be something you want to carry just to have in the back of your head. This is where we go. These are the messages. This is what I want to convey. So in addition to all those resources, MyPlate Wins has all of these interactive tools. So I'd recommend you, after this webinar, you go on MyPlate Wins and look at all of these specific things. Of course, supertracker.gov you've probably already seen. You can compare what you're eating to what the recommendation is for your age, activity level, gender, and the like. You have ChooseMyPlate.gov. You have What's Cooking, which is this icon over here, What's Cooking, the USDA Mixing Bowl. So there are a variety of recipes that you might want to look through. You have MyPlate Daily Checklist, which builds off the dietary recommendations for you or your participants based on your age, again, and life cycle stage. The BMI calculator, you input your weight and height, and you can calculate your BMI, or your participants could. This is one thing I want to point out and have you go look at. There are a series of portion distortion slides. There are actually 2 versions that you could use in public presentations or with partner agencies or in staff training. They're very well done. They compare serving sizes 20 years ago to current serving sizes, and you will see the portion distortion. Very instructive, very illuminating, and worth your while. Pregnancy weight gain calculator would be important to some of your participants, as would the preschooler growth chart page. And then right now there are 2 quizzes, 2 interactive quizzes that participants or you could go in and take. One is on fruits, and one is on vegetables. Something fun to do. I'd recommend that you go try it so that you have a sense of what's out there, and you might want to even integrate some of the questions into what you do. So again, lots to look at, lots of fun things to try out. This is the specific website location where those quizzes are housed. So I put that specifically on there so that you can go through and look that up. So I thank you for your participation in this webinar. We have a Qualtrics survey that we would like for you to take that would confirm your viewing of this webinar. I will add the address is in a publication that you can open on the FNEC website so that you can go directly to that Qualtrics survey and complete it. I want to thank you for your participation. I think you have lots of homework to do, lots of fun teaching ahead of you. If you have any questions, you have my email address there and our office phone number. So I'd be happy to take questions either in person on the phone if I'm here or via email. So good luck in your implementation of the 2015 Dietary Guidelines. And we'll be talking to you again on a future webinar.